Hello and welcome back to the Work Well podcast. My guest today on the show is Dr. Malie Coyne. Dr. Coyne is a clinical psychologist and psychology lecturer at N.U.I.G Galway, and she also sits on the mental health advisory panel for the A Lust for Life charity, so a really great organization for anyone that is familiar with it. Malie has just released her first book, Love In, Love Out, a compassionate approach to parenting your anxious child. And I've been following the launch closely on social media, and it looks like it's gone really, really well. So congrats, Malie, on that. With her considerable experience of working with children and families, Malie is fast becoming one of the leading voices in compassionate parenting in Ireland. Through her advocacy work, public speaking, and print, radio, and television contributions, Malie shines a light on mental health issues and promotes well-being throughout the lifespan. Malie lives in Galway with her husband and two little ladies. If you enjoy this conversation, then please share it with someone else that will benefit from it. You can go to workwellpodcast.com to find all the links. So perhaps the most popular episode of the Work Well podcast to date was my conversation with Dr. Coleman Noctor back in season 1, where there was a real focus on parenting and parenting from work and all the challenges around that. So there's a clear demand for information in this area, and that's why it's great to be able to look at this in detail again. So please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Malie Coyne. So Dr. Malie Coyne, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Hi, Brian. How are you? It's great to be here.
Great to have you here, Malie. And yes, I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, bit busy times, but sure, busy all the time, aren't we all? But yeah, doing well. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us. So how is speaking of that busyness? How is life and how is work for you at the moment? And how have the last few months impacted what you do?
So I work as a clinical psychologist in a primary care center, and initially when the COVID crisis happened, I didn't feel that comfortable being in work on site. So we've had the option, psychologists, of working from home. But I found that really quite difficult to do. I did try it for about 2 weeks, but I just felt like it was just, even though we have a garden room, which I'm in at the moment, which, is a separate space to the home space, which is really a great thing to have, I just found it impossible. You'd go in to go toilet or get a cup of tea, and next thing you're like involved in this massive drama or whatever's going on. And it's really hard, so I kind of had to just, put aside any fears I had about hygiene or cleanliness in work and all of that, and just kind of go in, try to be as safe as I could. Obviously practices were put into place in work where only maybe one person could use a kitchen, or there's more cleaning going on. But so we're seeing clients we're using the phone. Like, I don't have a webcam on my work computer, so it's basically checking in with clients by phone. And it's been busier than ever because we've had lots of COVID-related work to do. We set up a kind of a psychosocial response to people, particularly to people who are mums and dads who are having a baby and who have had a baby, so trying to support new parents. And I was involved in a good few kind of media plans around caring for families during COVID-19, bereavement, people who are caring for a sick person. So it's been really busy, actually, but very different to our normal work. And I don't know when we'll be able to resume face-to-face yet.
Excellent. Yeah. And you mentioned that challenge when you walk back into the house. I think, am I right in saying you have 2 young daughters yourself?
Yes, I do.
So you're trying to balance your own working day with that as well. How have you found that with everything else that's going on?
Difficult. I mean, I'm glad, my husband is there and we support each other, and, he works from home, thankfully, as well. I mean, as Coleman said, one of your previous guests, Coleman Noctor, that it's like parenting from work. It's like literally bringing your children into work. And there are times where I've been on a work phone call and, you know, next thing my children walk into the garden room, or, you know, I found it easier to actually go into work and to physically, and I think that's, oh, I don't know what's happening there. Can you see me?
Yep, you're fine. Yep.
All I can see is Zoom, the word Zoom written.
Okay, it's all going fine here.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I wonder, will I just keep talking? Because
Keep going, yeah. It's all fine from my side, yeah.
But just to say I can't see you, but that's fine. We'll just, okay. So yeah, you can edit this, can't you? I'm assuming.
I can edit the audio, certainly, yeah. The video.
Do you want, yeah, I don't know what to do now. Sorry, I just didn't, I didn't expect this to happen. So yeah, no, it's as Coleman Noctor said, it is like parenting from work, and it is a difficult situation, and I found it easier for myself to physically be somewhere else than at home. But I know that not many parents have had that luxury, and it's been very difficult for many parents out there.
Sure, and your role, as you mentioned, is as a clinical psychologist. And I think you work mainly with children and with families. What kind of advice have you been giving your clients over the last couple of months? I imagine a lot of them in similar positions to yourself, with young children at home, trying to balance the day job there as well. Are you getting some kind of queries in that area, and what advice have you been offering?
I suppose the most important thing is not to expect perfection from yourself. That you've done an amazing job already in terms of looking after your children. I mean, when they finished school on that day, the 12th of March, little did we know that was them finishing school for 6 months. I mean, if you told us that last year, we would have been thought, well, how could we ever cope? And I think, it's important for parents to acknowledge that they have coped. And I know we've all coped in different ways, and everyone's situation is unique. And some parents have definitely had it harder than other parents. I get that. But, not to expect perfection. And I've kind of been advising parents that if they're getting stressed about the homeschooling aspect or any particular aspect of it, to kind of give themselves a little bit of a break and to be gentle on themselves, because you're not their teacher, you're their parent. And I mean, there have been good aspects to the last few months in that, parents have also reported that, they've had a lot of difficulties, but it's also made their family bonds kind of much more important and stronger. It's taught them to give each other space, to encourage each other during the lockdown, yet to repair after rows, because rows inevitably happen when we're spending so much time together. And also it's kind of help parents to see that kids don't need as much as maybe we thought they needed. They certainly don't need to be overscheduled and be busy all the time. That actually having the last few months where there was less to do because you couldn't go further than 2 kilometers, that it kind of helped us to maybe appreciate moments more, which is hard to do when you're very busy.
Yeah, and well said. And that really does echo what Coleman said when he came on. Because I think a lot of parents, certainly around that time, were perhaps kind of feeling guilty if they weren't, as Coleman himself said, squeezing in maybe 6 hours of Latin before homeschooling before lunch.
Yeah.
Each day, maybe comparing themselves to others on Instagram as well, other parents that were perhaps balancing the day job and the perfect homeschooling as well. So that conversation with Coleman kind of certainly gave me and other parents I know permission not to feel guilty if you weren't absolutely nailing the homeschooling, you weren't doing a perfect job on that.
No, and I actually don't think kids are going to suffer that much. I mean, I do, like, there are parents, say, of children with special needs for whom it's been a lot harder. Kids that it's hard to explain why they're not doing their daily activities, or that they really thrive from that structure and routine. And I think all kids thrive from some structure and routine. But I think, once hopefully they go back to school in September and there's a way, found of how that can be done safely. But I think I always talk about the importance of the child-parent relationship. And I really feel that children don't need all that much. They need like a strong relationship with you as their parent. They need to understand, I suppose, that being human is, you're trying to teach them how to be human, which is imperfect, which is accepting difficult feelings, which is, going with the flow of life, rather than trying to be kind of multitasking perfect. I think this has been a good opportunity to help them with resilience, and resilience is all about facing a threat, a manageable threat, with you by their side. So I think this has been actually a very good opportunity for many parents. And I've actually heard that back from parents, that whilst they're experiencing difficulties and challenges, that they've also come out of their comfort zones as parents. I heard of one parent who jumped off the diving board in Salt Hill for the first time ever. So just fun things like that. I went cycling with my kids, and I hadn't done that ever with them, really. So just really, like, it's been a roller coaster of both good and less good, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. There certainly have been a lot of positives, haven't there? And I've heard some similar feedback, some similar stories. Not quite jumping off the diving board in Salt Hill, but some senior professionals who haven't really had the opportunity to spend a whole lot of time with their children over the last number of years, and they're actually really enjoying and relishing that. Even when during a working day, being able to sit down and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with their children at home, it is one of the positives of being able to spend that little bit more time with your family.
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard that. I've seen it with people on TV. I've heard that, and I think hopefully it might change the way our working practices continue into the future. Like, if we don't all have to spend ages traveling to get somewhere, and we can, do a lot of stuff on Zoom or on phone calls, although I'm pretty zoomed out at this stage. There are days where I've literally spent, 7 hours on Zoom. But, and you do miss the kind of social connection with your colleagues, and that you do miss kind of just having a cup of coffee and having a chat, which you do less of, I suppose, if you're having a meeting on Zoom. But I think there will be some learnings for parents, for employers, in terms of how to kind of move forward and how we can maybe better balance our lives in future. And I think there's some high flying people that maybe were flying all the time and busy all the time will realize that they've managed to see their child, cycle by themselves for the first time. They've managed to be there for these opportunities and these special moments that go by so fast when our children are young. So I think it's hopefully, but I suppose parents, I ran a webinar last week, and parents were saying, we were talking about what parts of normal are worth rushing back to, which I love that quote. And parents are a bit concerned about, how do we stop ourselves going back to the way things were before? How do we stop ourselves going to 3 birthday parties on a Saturday if my child's invited? And very often we kind of say yes to all these opportunities because we do that from a threat-based, from a fear-based place, where it's like, oh, my child will miss an opportunity if they don't go to the 3 birthday parties. But I hope that with maybe some awareness, and I suggested maybe to parents that they would sit down with their children and ask each family member, what parts of normal do we want to keep? Or what parts of, what we've learned do we want to keep? So like, how do we want, when we go back to school in September, what aspects have we learned that we want to keep going with, i.e. could be more family time, less activities, just to reflect on that. Because unless you take the time to reflect, then it's very easy to go back into the way things were before.
That's a great idea there, a great suggestion, and so simple, really. I mean, a lot of the organizations I work with they are listening to the employees and asking them along those terms, what do you want to go back to? What part of normal do you want to go back to?
Mm-hmm.
And actually involving our children in that discussion is a really, of course, a really useful suggestion there. And what would an ideal scenario look like when they do hopefully go back to school then, and getting their input into that?
Absolutely, because like say I was on a break with my kids the other day and they immediately said, "Oh, mommy, it's so great. You're going to not be thinking about work for a few days and you're going to be the fun mommy." Do you know? So it's like they are so clued in to how we are as parents that we just, I suppose it's not that you have to enjoy every moment of your family life. Nobody does, but it's about maybe kind of, you know, maybe not trying to multitask as much and trying to maybe say to yourself, I'm going to put my phone away. Now is my time off and I'm going to just not answer work emails. And I'm just going to, you know, focus on being with my kids right now and playing a game with them and not get disturbed. And just even like very short bursts of time that you do that is important.
Yeah, that's definitely something I need to work on, is kind of switching off the technology and spending dedicated time
Yes.
with my daughter. Speaking of technology, and I kind of touched on this with Coleman as well, like my daughter has gone now just for a play date today to see one of her best friends from school who she hasn't seen since this kicked off effectively. So it's great that she's getting back into those very small one-on-one play dates. Up until now, and it probably will continue for a period, I would imagine, she's been doing a few almost Zoom calls, I guess, Zoom play dates with a few friends.
Yeah.
And as adults, we're kind of talking about the Zoom fatigue that we're all suffering from. Where does Zoom fit in for our children? Is it a case of it's better than nothing, but we should kind of keep manage it time-wise? Is it just another kind of technology distraction for children?
No, I mean, the last few months, like when we had the lockdown, I think for me, like with my kids, they like doing WhatsApp video calls. I think they can video call maybe up to 3 or 4 friends. And then there were a couple of Zoom calls with more friends than that, my 6 and 8-year-olds. I think it's okay for them to interact with each other using those technologies, and it's a nice kind of way for them to connect with their friends. I know that a few of my daughter's 6-year-old friends weren't really into doing the WhatsApp calls. I think they probably felt like they were under pressure to have news when actually they didn't have much news because they weren't going anywhere, you know. So I think it can be, you know, for some children more than others, I wouldn't put them under pressure to do it or to answer a video call if they're not in the mood for it in that moment. So like, yeah, some kids get scared around things like that. So, but I don't think it's a bad thing as long as they're not spending all their days doing that. I mean, I think there's nothing that can replace actually, you know, that kind of meeting somebody and having, you know, my kids actually started writing a couple of letters to their friends and posting them, which I know we don't do anymore. Or else we did a good few kind of, and we still do, like outdoor play dates where we might meet and cycle with another family and go and have an ice cream somewhere. So I think there's a role. I think there's a role for it, but I think not to push your children into it if they don't fancy joining their Zoom kind of call with 30 other kids. That is completely up to them. But if they fancy it and it's not over the top and it doesn't replace kind of seeing 1 or 2 little friends, you know, in a safe way, then I think it's okay.
Excellent. Yeah, great advice. And my daughter actually turned 6 at the weekend, so
Lovely.
she's right in that bracket there. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think she's had it 1 or 2, a couple here and there. It certainly hasn't been over the top. But she
Yeah.
does I think she kind of gets bored with them fairly quickly though. So you're right. There's nothing that substitutes for that kind of in-person play, you know, touching and feeling toys and sharing toys, that kind of.
And I suppose one thing that was actually useful was that with my 8-year-old, she was very herself and her friend started playing Uno on the phone, on a WhatsApp video call. And then they also were playing Monopoly. They both happened to have Monopoly and Uno. So sometimes when kids don't know what to say to each other, because for them, they've been exposed for the first time to talking to people on the phone and video calls and all of this that we know how to do. Well, I suppose, you know, it's really new to them. So sometimes it can be easier if you kind of, they have a game that they can play with their little friends, and so that they don't feel like they're on show as much, and they have something kind of jointly to do together.
Excellent. Yeah. So I guess a major conversation that a lot of workplaces, a lot of organizations are having at the moment is around the return to the workplace. And it's really important. And how do we manage that and manage that safely? And how do we look after the well-being of our employees, of our people, as we transition back to the workplace? One area that's I believe is equally as important, but I'm not hearing a whole lot about it, is and hopefully, as you said, the schools do return in September in as safe a way as possible. How, as parents, would you suggest that we manage the return to school, if you like, both for ourselves as parents and for our little ones?
I think, obviously there's still uncertainty around whether and how that's going to happen. I think most parents will think that, yes, their kids are going back to school in September. We're not kind of certain about how or whether, but I think it's best for the month of July, to kind of like, to be kind of in holiday mode, and up to the first few weeks of August to kind of remain in that mode of it's still the summer. It's okay. I think any time that you're thinking about something with your child, and I touch on this a good bit in my book, the first step is to kind of try to figure out how you feel about it. So, Brian, if you were kind of anxious about your daughter returning to school and what that would look like, it would be important for you to think about how you feel inside your body about that, how you feel, what information you feel you have, and are you feeling anxious? Are you not? Do you need to talk to somebody about that? And I think it's really important for us to check our own reactions as parents before we discuss those things with our kids. And it's going to be hard for kids going back to school after 6 months. There's no doubt about it. They've had the kind of simplified life with you and less distractions, and to go back to waking up early and going back to school, and it's not going to be easy. And for some kids, it's going to be much harder. Like, I fully expect that. So I think kind of trying to gradually prepare them over the month of August, but not over the top. I suppose maybe in the 2 weeks leading up to the actual school opening, maybe start to kind of, do what you do every year, which is, buy a new school bag, or, get their supplies ready, and then maybe go and visit the school, the grounds, or wake up early for a while, start to get them back into a routine of going to bed earlier, waking up earlier, so that doesn't become a big shock. But explaining to them, once you know what the kind of the safety features are going to be, explaining that to them as you get the information. But I doubt they're going to be that anxious unless you're anxious, that kind of way. So I think to just, maybe in the week leading up they might be, but I think to just, be quite sensitive about timing in terms of when you start talking about it, and really kind of leaving it up to maybe the 2 weeks beforehand to start kind of bringing that into, it's fine to bring it into conversation, but I suppose checking yourself about that,
Yeah, great. That's makes so much sense. And some really good points there. Yeah, the routine has completely gone out the window here. So it would be a big shock. It would be a big shock to the system to just change that overnight. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to kind of slowly get back into that routine. As an added complication, we may be even changing schools as well. But it was the most unusual year ever for my daughter, starting in junior infants. It's a much shortened a year.
Yes.
Been at home with us for quite a while now, and then potentially changing schools as well. But as you said, some great advice there. So we'll certainly, but for me anyway, that's really useful. So thank you for sharing.
And maybe just asking your daughter how she feels about going back to school or starting a new school, and going with where she's at with it, and really kind of listening to what she has to say, and rather than trying to reassure her immediately, just listen to her and kind of reflect back what she's saying, and kind of let her know that whatever information you get from the government or from the school about safety, you will convey that on, you'll pass that on, you know, that she knows that there's this line of communication. Whatever they know, you'll tell her and you'll discuss it, you know, so that kids can get more anxious when they're left in the dark.
Okay, so even communicating that there's no update is better than not
Absolutely.
communicating at all. Yeah.
But they mightn't care there's no update. They might just be busy running around in a field and making dens, and that's okay too. That's exactly what they should be doing during the summer. You have to let your children's brains turn to mush. That's okay during the summer. We all need break times.
Excellent. Yes, box forts here mainly. So you're not saying we should catch up on the homeschooling over the summer months then?
I think, I mean, when I hosted a webinar there last week, some parents are choosing to maybe keep one or two little activities going. Other parents, like what we've been doing more this summer, is having reading time. So both my kids have gotten into a particular series of books. I mean, we're broke at this stage from going to the bookshop and buying more, but we kind of say, okay, now go and read for a while, and they go and read for a while. So rather than kind of sit down and do the homeschooling, that they're reading a bit and using that as one of the activities, because it's hard to fill their days. It's like Groundhog Day every day, you know. It's really tough, like, you know.
It really is. It really is. You mentioned your book there, which you've just launched. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a book about how it's called Love In, Love Out, a parent's, God, what's my title? It's here.
We'll add it in the show notes. Oh, there it is. Love In, Love Out.
A compassionate approach to parenting your anxious child. That's good. I knew the title to my book. It's a book that I wrote because I was an anxious child when I was younger, and I really wanted parents to understand what that feels like for a child, and to kind of increase the understanding between children and parents. Or it's a book that educators can read as well, or anybody that works with kids. And I was really into that idea of compassionate, because it's love in, love out. The love in part is about the parent kind of reflecting on themselves in response to their child's anxiety, and kind of showing themselves kindness by, you know, doing things that are good for them and nurturing themselves before they can then kind of exude love out to their children and help their children. So I have this kind of acronym called SAFE in the book that goes through the various steps parents can take. The first one is self-care, looking after themselves. A is for anchoring, which is when your child is in a fight or flight response, that you're kind of helping them to feel safe, and there's ways of doing that. F is for feeling felt, which is really validating your child's experience, like what I was talking about there with your child, you know, just kind of really like reflecting back what they're saying and connecting with them on a feeling level. And then it's only then you can move to the E, which is empowerment. And in the empowerment section, I talk about things like mindfulness, kindfulness, which is like self-compassion for kids, cognitive behavioral therapy for the older child, and also play, because I trained in play therapy, and after doing my clinical psychology training, and play is the opposite of fear. So when my child comes to me and says she's afraid of monsters, rather than me saying there is no monster, you know, at 8 o'clock at night when she's going to bed, or 9 o'clock, whatever time they go to bed nowadays, that I kind of respond to that in a playful way and say to her, oh, Amy, you poor thing, you know, like, so you think there's a monster, and what kind of monster? And maybe being playful about it. I wonder, could we put a tutu on the monster, or could we imagine the monster on roller skates, or could we put a jar next to your bed and trap the monster overnight, or use this spray to spray out the monster? And what that's doing for the child is validating how they actually feel, because a 5 or 6 year old really believes in monsters, and to kind of help them, you know, to meet them where they're at, and to take the sting out of the fear and add in a little bit of kind of creativity and play and fun. And that actually works really well with children.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think I've kind of been already doing that kind of thing. So great to hear that be validated there. Yeah.
Mm.
Gruffalo is a very popular book in this house. So
Books and storybooks
yeah.
are just fantastic. I talk about storytelling in my book, and about kind of the value of when children find it difficult sometimes to talk about their own fears. Reading a book about a child who has fears can really kind of help them, you know, because because they kind of put themselves into that character's shoes, and then they can see the creative possibilities that are possible. So I actually have quite a number of little storybooks running through my book, because I'm just a huge storybook fan and I love them. And I think it's a really helpful way for children to kind of process their feelings.
Yeah, me too. So that sounds great. So we'll definitely include the details for the book in the show notes that go along with this
Great.
episode.
Cool.
And best of luck with it as well. So I know it's only recently launched, so the very best of luck with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And you're busy, as you said. You're also on the A Lust for Life mental health advisory panel.
Yes, yeah.
What's involved with that?
Well, I've been involved with A Lust for Life since they began, basically back in 2016, I think it is, when a number of people, including Brezzi and Susan Quirk and a number of other people, got together and created this movement, a well-being movement. And it has kind of seen quite a number of changes in the last few years. It's really kind of like developed over the last few years. Initially, they were big into kind of physical health and running, kind of or hosting running events for people and that kind of thing. And then they became more like, they've won a number of awards like Social Entrepreneurs Ireland and Google Awards and lots of awards to kind of like, so what they do is they choose certain kind of campaigns and then they try to get those campaigns funded, and it's always to do with improving mental health. They have a school well-being program at the moment where they're filming with children, and they're going to be using that content for use with other children and in other classrooms. So I suppose my role over the last 4 years has been probably the jack of all trades with them. You know, initially my role was to kind of help them out with, you know, there were people contacting them for kind of mental health advice, and just finding a way of making that all ethical, you know, in terms of their website, and, you know, and also talk, you know, yeah, just kind of helping them with that. And then there was also a number of electric picnic events that I sat on panels for, where we had this campaign a few years ago. I don't know, do I have the book here? Actually, I do. Sorry. It's the Little Book of Sound. We wrote this together, myself and Brezzi and Susan Quirk. And it was a campaign that we ran called Sound Effect in 2017, where it was kind of like a backlash against, there's so much negativity around. We thought, let's spread positivity. So we wrote a book that talked about things like self-kindness, gratitude and mindfulness, and the benefits of all of those for your mental well-being. So we wrote that little book, and then it was kind of like it was for charity that we wrote it, and it was in the bookshops and things. So you can probably still find some on their you can find them on their website. And then in the last few years, I mean, part of being on the mental health, I was on their board, sitting on their board for about a year, but and I really enjoyed that, to kind of be involved in the background. And what I loved about that actually is I'm so used to being at meetings for my regular job, where, you know, there's a lot of barriers in place at meetings sometimes in certain organizations. You can understand why. It's bureaucracy, it's fear, but in terms of sitting at a meeting with Brezzi and with all the people involved with the Lust for Life, I mean, the sky was the limit. It was incredible to hear the plans that they had. Now, it's not to say that we went ahead with all those plans, but there was so much. They have so many contacts with creative people, and what they're able to create is incredible, really incredible. There's amazing people there. And now, I suppose, after about a year of being on their board, I had to step down because I was writing the book, but now I'm on their mental health advisory panel, which basically means they can contact me anytime they want. And then during the whole COVID crisis, I have done 15 Facebook live events every Wednesday night at the moment I'm doing them Wednesday night at 9:30. I've turned it into like a broadcast podcast called Parenting with Compassion, which is all about parents, interviewing parents at the moment about how they can parent themselves and their children with compassion. But for the first 12 shows of that during COVID-19, it was just me talking, and they put that up on their website, and Eddie Murphy was doing it as well, and Brezzy, and now Fiona Brennan and Brian Penny are also doing some work for them as well. It was basically like a self-care during COVID-19, but lots of parents joined me on that, and it's been incredible actually for me, because I never would have thought that I'd be doing like live every Wednesday night. And then for me, it's turned into like a broadcast podcast, because I've always wanted to get, because I used to have a radio show many years ago, and I always wanted to get back into it, but little did I know that I could do that live. And I'm also doing a season thing where like I'm going to stop then at the beginning of August, and then I'll do a new season when I'm good and ready to do more. But it's been great having the A Lust for Life kind of backing, and they're also going to be hosting they hosted my online book launch with me as well. So I think we'll always be very close, myself and themselves, in terms of future collaborations.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that sounds like another excellent parenting resource there. You call it Parenting with Compassion. Mm-hmm. And so it's available, if people can go to, is it alustforlife.ie? They can find
it's alustforlife.com. You can go onto my website, drmaliecoyne.ie. All of my Facebook Live, the COVID-19 broadcasts are there. And then there's a link in to a YouTube channel with all my Parenting with Compassion. And the Parenting with Compassion is more like me interviewing and having chats with people, whereas the COVID-19 12 weeks were to do with me speaking to the camera about, or to the phone about, everything that was going on, how to deal with uncertainty, the important, how to help your children and how to help yourself during this time. I dealt with racism, anything that was in the news at the time that I felt really needed to be talked about.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, because there was so much uncertainty then, wasn't there? So yeah, that sounds like a great resource. So we can link to that in the article.
Brilliant.
The podcast. But I hear what you're saying there about the barriers, if you like, with traditional meetings or traditional organizations. But I think that, A Lust for Life has built up such a positive reputation now. It's such a positive movement that I guess if A Lust for Life comes knocking on your door looking for a bit of support, you're probably going to give it, no matter who or what the organization is. So it's thanks to that, I would say, that doors would open a lot easier, I would imagine.
I think so, and they've had a lot of support, and from very, very many organizations and funding, and we thank people so much for supporting us. I kind of say us because I kind of feel like I'm part of them. But what goes on behind the scenes is very, whilst there's loads of creativity and loads of ideas and all of that, there's also really good governance, and they're kind of a proper charity that take themselves very seriously and take all of those kind of guidelines very seriously. So you kind of know you're in safe hands.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a broad scope of activities and initiatives happening there. I mean, maybe from the outside looking in, I would have thought it was solely mental health focused. But certainly there is that focus, but there's also the physical activity then, as you mentioned as well, and other initiatives that are supported by the movement.
And to go back to the roots of the movement, which is a website, and they have a website with incredible content from people who write for them, professionals. The personal stories of people who've written for them, they're actually even more popular than the stuff written by professionals. You can kind of go into any topic. There's loads of kind of podcasts. They've made podcasts, and they won an award a few months ago. I was actually up against them at that award show, which was mad. But they've made some amazing podcasts as well. So I can only imagine what's next with them, but they're definitely going strong, and I'm delighted to be kind of partnered with them.
Excellent. Yeah, going strong, and certainly seems like you're going from strength to strength yourself with all the activities you have going on. So listen,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much for your time, Malie. You've been very generous. Where can people go to find out more about you and what you do?
Easiest place is drmaliecoyne.ie, which is my website that my husband is so good at putting together for me.
IT support.
He's so good. And also, you know, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Dr. Malie Coyne, which is where I do my live broadcasts. So any of those. And if people want to email me any queries or anything, drmaliecoyne@gmail.com. You know, people do email sometimes with, although I don't see people privately, I usually direct people in a particular direction if they need some support. I also have book recommendations and COVID-19 resources on my website that have been really useful for people in terms of finding information and that. So yeah, thank you so much, Brian.
It's been a pleasure, Malie. Thanks again for your time. Take care. Best of luck with the book and with all your work, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.